to another edition of Vinyl Fetish Club. We're up here in the sweaty vinyl attic. Climate change is really impacting Portland, man, let me tell you. We've got another edition to talk about 100 records that matter, 100 albums that matter. And you know, I'm getting back in the groove of doing these videos, and I realized I sort of missed a few things last time. I missed the little logo in the corner. I missed Andy. And she'll be here next week to join us for our album discussion next week. And I missed a little bit of drinking. I noticed looking back at some of those old videos that we did, that usually we were out on a Saturday night having a gay old time, and then came home a little bit sauced up and recorded some videos talking about some of our favorite albums. So in that spirit, we are going to be drinking tonight some nice bourbon. This is from Eastside Brewery in Portland. It's called Burnside West End Blend. I picked it up today at the liquor store. I didn't even know about this brand here in Portland, and it is quite tasty. I've already been tasting it. So yeah. I mean, since we're talking about Fleetwood Mac tonight, we should probably talk about cocaine, but we're just gonna talk about bourbon. Hi. So this little mini-series is called 100 Albums That Matter, 100 Albums That Should Be in Your Collection. We are talking about Fleetwood Mac tonight, and I think probably when people want to talk about Fleetwood Mac and albums, they want to talk about Rumors, the 1977 album that sold 10 million copies and was just a monster. It changed the musical landscape. It was on the radio constantly. Every song on the album was a single, all the way to the modern era where people are listening to Dreams while they're riding their skateboard and drinking cranberry juice. I mean, it's just sort of, you know, an omnipresent album. We're not going to talk about Dreams. We're going to talk about their 1979 album, Tusk. And if the Beatles, you know, if you were to think about their 1967 giant record, Sgt. Pepper's, this colorful explosion of everything that was psychedelic in 1967, they followed that up with their 1968 album, which was the White Album, a double album that was very different. It had a lot of sort of individual voices on that record. There's a parallel here with Tusk. It's a double album that really represents kind of the individual voices of the main singers in the band, Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks, and Christine McVie, along with Mick Fleetwood and John McVie on bass. And this record, it has some parallels with the White Album. And it also was the product of a lot of tension. They'd had this monster record that, you know, the album before it, the Fleetwood Mac album, the album with Rhiannon, had done pretty well, right? That was a big song, and there was a couple hits on Rhiannon. And then Rumors just became the phenomena of the 70s. How do you follow that up? So they took 10 months to record it, $1 million, which was a lot of money in the late 1970s to record it. They wanted to buy their own studio or create their own studio, and the record company said, no, you can't do it. They kind of recorded in bits and pieces, and when it came out, it only sold 4 million copies, which was seen as kind of a failure at the time, compared to how huge Rumors had been. But over the years, this album has increased in its appreciation in the sort of underground artists, including bands like Camper Van Beethoven that covered Tusk, and the love for this record and what it means. When we look at this record, when we kind of dissect it, what we see is a lot of tension, a lot of attempt to be relevant. Lindsey Buckingham was hugely influenced by the kind of underground music that was happening at the time, mainly the Talking Heads, who were in 1978, 79, were still kind of an underground CBGB's band, very influenced by the Talking Heads and kind of the post-punk new wave music of the late 70s. An attempt, you know, to create a band recording, a Fleetwood Mac recording that would launch the band into the 1980s. There was a lot of expectation at the end of the 70s that the 80s were going to be very different. And in fact, they were very different. But when this record came out, there was a lot of sort of traditional album-oriented rock fans who didn't know what to make of it, and they didn't buy it. And it just sort of sat there for a while, but over the years it's really gained. When we look at it now, we see there's this incredible depth in it. There are these three vocalists that have their moments. So since Christine McVie was sort of the older singer in the band, the one who had been in the band the longest, her songs are really front and center. She starts off the album with this song Over and Over, which is this, you know, usually albums start with like the upbeat, let's party, we're here, we're ready to rock, let's get going. It's this pastoral, sweeping, just, I don't know even how to describe it. It's just sort of this magical floating on cloud song over and over with the other vocalists harmonizing with her. She has a song called Brown Eyes that is literally old school Fleetwood Mac. It's Peter Green, the original Fleetwood Mac guitarist, is playing on it. She also has the big hit, Think About Me, is kind of the big hit off this record. It really sounds like that 70s rumor era Fleetwood Mac. For the people that needed like their Mac, Think About Me was the song. Stevie Nicks at the time was really cultivating the sort of black witch persona, where she had been Rhiannon and Dreams and kind of sending these mystical messages. So her songs tend to be a little bit darker. Sarah and Sisters of the Moon. The song I love on this album is Storms, which is really sort of sweeping and very powerful song. The real backbone of this album is Lindsey Buckingham, who has 9 songs on the album, including the title track Tusk, which was the first single when it came out in 1979. That was the weirdest song that you ever heard on the radio. It had the UCLA marching band. It had this weird chanting on it. There was a lot of people where I lived in the Bible Belt that thought somehow this record was satanic. Who are these little, you know, hobbits that are chanting on this record? Don't say that you love me, love me. I mean, it was a very weird record, but a lot of his songs, including It's Not That Funny, Is It, were very new wavy, were very sort of punchy, and he was really sort of capturing some of the energy at the time and channeling Fleetwood Mac. My favorite song on this album is Walk a Thin Line, which I didn't, when this record came out, I didn't buy it. In 1979, I was into sort of power pop and the Knack. I was into the Jam. I was into Blondie, and I was into Linda Ronstadt, of course. But I was really into sort of the Ramones mostly. So I didn't buy this record when it came out. But in 1981, Mick Fleetwood put out a solo record, which was kind of a world music record, which in 1981 I was very into, called The Visitor. And he redid A Walk a Thin Line with George Harrison on guitar, by the way. And it's a brilliant version. And it's what actually compelled me to go back and get Tusk and figure out what it's all about. And then, of course, I just thought, what, this record is freaking genius. So this record comes out, doesn't capture the public the way the previous album, Rumors, did, but has grown over time. The follow-up album was a live album, the 1980 album Live. They had been on tour with Bob Marley and the Wailers in Europe and put out this album, but it came out on December 8th, 1980, which is the day that John Lennon died, so it lost a little bit of its oomph when it came out because everybody was focused on John. But I do remember Oh Well being played on the radio a lot, Lindsey Buckingham's version of the Fleetwood Mac classic Oh Well. And then the band kind of peaks and has some early 80s hits, Hold Me and, some, but sort of like, doesn't become as important as they were in this ascent in the 1970s. So what is that all about? So in each of these album reviews, I want to bring a little sociology into. And here the sociology is about the bohemian ethic. The bohemian ethic is born in Paris in the 1840s after the French Revolution. Before the French Revolution, if you were an artist, if you were a painter or a writer, you got a patron from the aristocracy, dukes and duchesses, who would pay you to paint portraits of them, or write songs about them, or write plays in which they were the heroes. When the French Revolution happens and we move towards democracy, all that patronage of artists ends. And there becomes a new ethic that emerges among the downwardly mobile artists that says, art for art's sake. We're going to identify with the underclass. We're going to identify with the quote-unquote gypsies of the time who were from Bohemia in Czechoslovakia. We'll call ourselves the Bohemians. And so we will suffer for our art. And so this is Victor Hugo. This is the Impressionist paintings. This is all the people that are chopping their ears off to prove that they're true to their art. This is Oscar Wilde. in London, who's a part of the Vagabonds, who says, you know, every one of us are in the gutter, but some of us are looking up at the stars. A great bohemian line that became a line in a Pretender song. And this idea of suffering from your art. So the idea is that you need tension. You need suffering. You need obstacles to produce great art. This sort of emerges as the norm of artists. So think about Lennon and McCartney, for example, who are producing these amazing songs because they're kind of in competition with each other, and they can't be happy unless they've sort of pleased the other one. When the Beatles split up, that tension's gone and that sort of creative energy goes away. Or think about Keith Richards and all the drugs that he did that helped him produce these great Rolling Stone songs. This idea that you have to suffer in some way. And sort of Fleetwood Mac was experiencing that at the same time. They'd had this explosion, this unexpected success of Rumors, and how are they going to follow up with it? They're engaged in a lot of tension within the band. Christine McVie is dating Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys, and apparently it was a cocaine blizzard while they were making this record where they were just out of their minds, and Dennis Wilson never came out of that when he fell off his sailboat in 1983 and died. And there's just all this tension. Apparently Lindsey Buckingham was having nervous breakdowns, literally pulling his hair out while he was making this record. And so they were so under the gun to create this follow-up that the result was this amazing work of art. So the question for us is, do artists have to suffer for our benefit? I remember recently hearing that Adele was going through a divorce, and my first thought was good. If she's going through a divorce, she's going to write some great breakup songs that I'm going to enjoy. If she's happy, probably not going to make great music. In fact, you know, where has she been while she's been happy? She's been off being happy. We need artists to suffer. So the question here is, does great art require tension? Does it require suffering? Does it require some channeling of oppression, whether it's racial oppression or gender oppression or whatever, to create something that the rest of us can identify with? Because I'll tell you what, the rest of us are suffering. Unless you're living, you know, in Beverly Hills and are feeling really good about every single day and you just got nothing but first world problems. The rest of us are trying to pay the rent, we're trying to pay the mortgage, we're trying to pay childcare, we're trying to figure out what to do in our relationships, we're trying to figure out what to do with our life, and we're experiencing tension on a daily basis. And we've got an artist that is experiencing that tension. Somehow I think we pick up on it. If they're just everything is great and nothing to worry about, it's really hard to identify with that music. But if there is some element of suffering, then that music sounds good to us. So that's my argument for why Tusk matters. And I'll say another thing about Tusk. Tusk was a double record, and in those days, before CDs and before streaming, double records required a little bit of interaction on our part. That you had to put on side one and listen to side one, and then flip it over and put on side two. And then you had to put record one back in the jack and get out record two and put on side one, and then side three. Whiskey break. And so, you know, we were more involved in the listening process and picking up on the subtleties of what went into that process of making that music. This is not a call for artists to suffer more, but this is a call for us to understand that their suffering translates to us because we can somehow identify with that. And I think that is an important element of great art. And I think Fleetwood Mac and their 1979 album Tusk is a sort of powerful statement about that process, and it's why it needs to be in your collection. Alright, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe. We'd love to have more subscriptions. And next week, Andy will be here, and we'll be talking, we're going to bring it back to the 21st century, and for our album that matters, we're going to be talking about, are you ready for this? Lana Del Rey's Norman fucking Rockwell, which I argue is one of the best albums of the last 10 years. Also, this bourbon, good God, it's really good. I like you, East Side Brewery. So I do want to say that this music, and all this music matters. These records matter, this music matters, and you matter. So let's talk about it.